This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. After months of delay, there finally has been a joint status report on the Heritage Foundation's FOIA request to the State Department. When you step back and look at the full picture, it becomes impossible to characterize this as a routine visa matter and Harry being treated just like everyone else. According to these sworn filings in federal court, the U.S. Department of State has acknowledged that a FOIA request concerning Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, produced an extraordinary volume of potentially responsive records, over 1,000 documents spread across multiple senior offices of this department. Let's go ahead and read through this short little document and then talk about what some of this might actually mean. This says here, the case stems from a Freedom of Information Act FOIA request that plaintiffs submitted to the Department for records regarding Henry Charles Albert David, also known as the Duke of Sussex or Prince Harry. Since the last joint status report, ECF number 9, the department finished conducting a search for responsive records in bureaus that the parties determined were likely to have responsive records. The department identified 517 potentially responsive records from the Bureau of Consular Affairs, 2 potentially responsive records from the Office of the Deputy Secretary of State, 271 potentially responsive records from the Office of the Legal Advisor, and 217 potentially responsive records from the Office of the Secretary. The department initially understood the plaintiff's request was limited to visa records, which the department would categorically withhold under exemption number 3, as reported in the previous JSR joint session report. After discussions, the department agreed with plaintiffs to proceed with processing the identified documents in its usual course. Since the last JSR, the department proceeded to an initial responsiveness review of the documents identified in paragraph 3. The department has completed its responsiveness review and is deduplicating the potentially responsive records in the final processing phase. As such, the department will begin reviewing and processing the documents imminently. Once the deduplicating process is complete, defendant will reach out to plaintiff with a tentative final record count and to establish a mutually agreed upon production schedule moving forward. Pursuant to the court's March 31st, 2025 minute order, the parties will file their next joint status report in 60 days on February 10th, 2026. All right, let's talk about what this possibly could mean. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just looking at what these offices specifically do and theorizing. But it does feel to me like somebody is certainly dragging their feet here on the production of these documents. Is it a coincidence that now Harry all of a sudden has this security risk assessment review and getting another shot with the Home Office? All right, let's take a look at this a little closer. So the Bureau of Consular Affairs identified over 500 potentially responsive records alone, which signals a prolonged and active management of his visa. For an ordinary applicant, Joe Schmo like you and I, consular records are limited and pretty finite. Hundreds of records indicate ongoing consultations, internal deliberations, repeated guidance requests from posts abroad like Nigeria, and continuous reassessment of status. In the context of Prince Harry, this volume suggests that consular officers were not operating on autopilot but were documenting decisions carefully, aware that each action carried diplomatic consequences and potential downstream scrutiny. So then we have the 271 records from the Office of the Legal Advisor, which dramatically elevates the seriousness of this case. Remember, Prince Harry's lawyer, David Sherborne, was involved at one point with DHS. Now, what this tells me is that there is sustained legal engagement. For Prince Harry, regardless if the palace PR machine spun to the world that Harry is no longer a working royal and he's just Harry, a large legal paper trail points to recurring analysis of immigration eligibility, diplomatic considerations, international law, immunity questions, and the legality of any discretionary or preferential treatment. Lawyers do not generate hundreds of records unless the department is navigating legal uncertainty and precedent-setting decisions or significant exposure to litigation, congressional inquiry, or public challenge. We know that Harry has been in a lot of shit. The volume here, I don't think is surprising. It signals that legal risk was not a hypothetical. It was actively managed. Now, what's most striking, though, are the 217 potentially responsive records from the Office of the Secretary. Now, remember, the last 4 years was Secretary Blinken under the Biden administration. I want people to understand that the Secretary's office does not accumulate hundreds of documents on visa issues unless they are politically sensitive, diplomatically consequential, or reputationally dangerous. For Prince Harry, this quantity suggests the case was briefed, tracked, and repeatedly discussed at senior levels, likely involving talking points, interagency coordination, and awareness of how any decision might affect bilateral relations or public perception. Oh, you mean interfering with the 2020 election and censoring Americans? Yeah, I could see that as a diplomatic crisis. Now, even though on the surface this might look like just a short 2-page update not telling us very much, I think it's important that we take into consideration the scale of documentation. Over 1,000 potentially responsive records spread across operational, legal, and senior leadership offices. Now, even though there are 2 records from the Office of the Deputy Secretary, even though small in number, they are meaningful because that could signal there was some type of formal escalation, which I suspect was going on. You see, the Deputy Secretary's involvement actually signals that this matter with Harry crossed the threshold requiring direct senior oversight. Now, we don't know if that oversight was with Anthony Blinken or if it's now with Marco Rubio. Either way, we know that this situation had visibility at the top. Well, I don't think any of us are surprised in the way that this is being handled by the government. Obviously, they have a lot of information on this guy, and I guarantee there's stuff in there that could cause a diplomatic crisis. I mean, look at all the stuff that openly people have been talking about that nobody seems to want to hold this guy accountable for. Why? Now, what I'm becoming frustrated with are the constant lies we're being fed. Does anybody believe that the palace PR machine told us the truth, that Harry was stepping back from being a working royal to go be a private citizen and gain his financial independence without having any type of diplomatic protection? The United States sees this guy as a head of state. And the reason why they're dragging their feet on releasing this information obviously shows that there's something that they're trying to delay from getting out into the public. Why do you think that this joint status report came 2 months later? This was actually due on October 20th, 2025 this year, but it's December 15th. Almost 2 months later, they're now telling us that this is what they have on him. And just coincidentally, Shabana Mahmood has said, yes, Harry will grant you another security risk assessment to see if maybe you do qualify to get your status and security back. And lo and behold, just in time for when the next joint status review to drop in February, by that time, we should know if Harry has his security back. Because when this risk assessment is done and they say, oh yeah, we need to implement this back to Prince Harry, guess what's going to happen to that joint status report? It's going to say we can't share any details because he is a protected class. It's a security risk. I think many of us are starting to play out what we see going to happen with Harry. If Harry does indeed get his security back, I think many of us, including myself, are going to be infuriated because the likelihood of Harry being held accountable for all the damage that he has caused to the United States is not going to happen. Now, I'm not saying that I've given up hope that the U.S. won't take action on Prince Harry. I'm just saying I feel a little deflated right now because here we are in December, and I almost feel like we are running out of time, especially if Harry does have the security risk assessment done in January and they give a ruling that he gets the security back, then There goes the case with the State Department. I mean, there's a lot going on right now in the United States. In 4 days, we have the Epstein files being released. So who knows what else is in there about Prince Andrew? There's a lot that's going on with the royal family. And I don't think the United States is going to want to add more fuel to the fire to embarrass the royal family. So what I could see happening is that PR-wise, they're going to make Harry look like, oh, he wants to go back home and reconcile with his pa and go back to being a working royal. But really, in the background, behind the scenes, the United States is telling Harry, you need to leave. I think we're all getting pretty fed up with the preferential treatment that the elite class gets versus what regular, ordinary people get subjected to. But it's the globalists who have been causing the most suffering to humanity. Now, the last thing that I want to say here before I go, what I find, I think, the most angering of all of this is knowing that Harry and Meghan are part of this globalist agenda, an agenda that has now made the world that much more unsafe. So when we look at the tragic events that happened this past weekend, recognize that that is part of the fallout from these broken policies that have been forced onto people by unelected bureaucrats enforcing this Agenda 2030. When I look at the royal family now, I find it very difficult to support the things that they stand for because I don't support this. I don't support open borders and illegal migration and allowing the homeland to be so vulnerable. And here you have the UK, you have Canada, and you now have Australia, all experiencing the same types of threats, and the people are helpless. And when they cry and call upon the king to do something, he has looked the other way, especially when it comes to the children. We have every right to be angry. I'm angry whenever I see Prince Harry because he's here on U.S. soil and was helping the Biden regime, especially with settling these unvetted Afghans who now are posing a national security threat to Americans. That should piss all of us off, knowing that Harry had a hand in this and had access to our military base in New Jersey. The irony of this guy crying for security because he doesn't feel safe when he has made America less safe over the couple of years that he's been here. Some of you may disagree with me, but blood is on King Charles's hands because he is ultimately responsible for this realm. He handles the UK, Australia, and Canada, and all three of them are in a state of chaos as a result of keeping the borders wide open and allowing these animals into the country, knowing that they're dangerous. And now societies all across the West are living in fear. And then we have this asshole who might be getting his security back so he can feel safe. Now I'm going to leave you here with this final thought. Another thing that Americans need to be aware of is that let's say Shabana Mahmood says, okay, we need to fund the security for the Sussexes. We're talking about Harry, Meghan, and these two invisible children. She might look at Harry's time spent in the United States and say, well, you know what? It's not going to cost the UK taxpayer all that much because for the most part, the bill is going to sit on the American taxpayer to pay it. In addition, Meghan Markle is never going to step foot again on UK soil. You can bet that. So you know what that means? That means that the United States is going to have to pay for this bitch's security till the end of her days. Yes, that is what's going to happen. And on top of it, these two are going to have access to intelligence, where we know they'll use it for nefarious purposes. We're going to have to ask Jesus for help on this one. That's all I can say. But what do you guys think? Definitely let me know your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.